Hi, everyone. We are now in chapter 8, which is the second to the last chapter for this semester. And we are going to learn how to evaluate arguments and truth claims. And that is how to evaluate good arguments and bad arguments. And more importantly, when you come across bad arguments, how to refute them. So everything that we have learned so far is culminating in this chapter. So you may think I do not need to refute arguments because it is obvious when they're bad. Yeah, we're all lucky that we have by now learned enough about deductive and inductive reasoning and how to spot fallacies in order to know when arguments are bad. However, not everybody has taken a class like this or learned enough about reasoning to know what we know now. And bad arguments and untruths have a way of spreading widely, both by sheer volume and by the speed enabled by the internet. And they have a way of taking hold in people's minds as it must be true, right? And this explains the conspiracy theories, all the hashtags, all the trending, etc. But this really must be combated because otherwise we live in a world where truth does not matter. And that would be a very sad world. So let's start first by asking ourselves what a good argument is. A good argument satisfies two particular standards, so logical correctness and accuracy. So as we learned in chapter 3, the validity of an argument is about whether or not the conclusion is necessarily drawn from the premises. But this alone does not tell you whether the premises themselves are true. So there can be false premises, but the conclusion drawn from the false premises, as long as they logically follow, is valid. So that is one thing. It has to be logically correct, but it also has to be accurate. So that means that the argument also has to be sound. Yeah, so the validity, the logical correctness alone is not enough. So in order for an argument to be good, the premises themselves must be true and the conclusion must be drawn logically. Yeah, so A, then B, then C, and with no step skipped. And they also have to necessarily follow because A, then B, and then because B, then C, etc. from premises. So it has to be both valid and sound. So along with valid and sound, arguments also must be precise, relevant, clear, complete, and fair, all of which mean don't be necessarily verbose, okay? No one wants to go through 5 minutes of premises to come to a simple conclusion. When a few will do, give a few. It is not always the more, the better. Remember Occam's razor? So remember that. So this sets up the strategy for refuting bad arguments on account of bad premises. So how do we do that? In general, it is not enough to say that it is not valid or sound. Okay, sometimes you have to show with examples why you're making the case that something is not valid or sound. The premises, for premises to be true, they also have to pass the test of three things. Personal experience. My experience tells me that this premise is not true. And background beliefs, general knowledge tells me that this is not true. And the evidence of credible sources, the authority used to back the claim, is sometimes very weak. And we learned all of these through fallacies. So when arguments do not pass any or all three tests and are therefore bad, you may use the following strategies. First, you can show why the claim is obviously false or absurd. This is called reducing to the absurd. You can use it to prove something or that the opposite is true, but for now, we're going to use this as a strategy called reducing to the absurd. For example, all feminists are man haters is something that is said a lot. Okay, obviously, this is absurd because one does not mean the other, right? So it's not necessarily true. And also, um, you can take this argument to its absurdity. So, all feminists are man haters, then how do you explain that many feminists are married to men and also have sons? So, do they hate men? Obviously not. So, obviously, this is an absurd claim. Second, you can give countervailing evidence to the argument. Okay, so somebody makes an argument, you make a counter, you bring in examples that counters that claim. So, for example, hard drugs should be legalized because we already have legalized drugs. You can argue that hard drugs are not therapeutics, so and that they are highly addictive, and that the addictive nature leads to more overdoses and therefore death, etc. So they are different than other legalized drugs. I mean, you spot the fallacy of equivocation and all that stuff, but you can give arguments, also examples that counter this claim. So these would be counter examples to the argument that hard drugs are the same as other legalized drugs. So there are many ways in which what we have learned kind of converge, but counter examples are always a good way to refute a claim. Okay, so the next few bullets are taken from the book. The following key questions are from the book. Use these questions as guides to evaluating arguments. Are the premises true? In other words, is the argument sound? Okay, is the reasoning correct? Is the argument deductively valid and inductively strong? Does the arguer commit any logical fallacies? Does the arguer express his or her points clearly and precisely? Are the premises relevant to the conclusion? Are the arguer's claims logically consistent? I'm going to fix this right here. So, are the arguer's claims logically consistent? Do any of arguer's claims contradict other claims made in the argument? So, we saw that in the fallacy of inconsistency. Is the argument complete? Is all relevant evidence taken into account? Is the argument fair? Is the arguer fair-minded and unbiased in his or her presentation of the evidence and treatment of opposing arguments and views? So these are just summaries of what we've learned and how to use what we've learned to refute bad arguments and untrue claims. Okay, so have fun in this chapter. And we will do a little bit of writing next week about refuting arguments. Okay? Talk to you later. Bye-bye.